Hello, this is a presentation on our paper where generalized equitable design practice meets specific Indigenous communities. I am Kari from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. My co-author is Nurit Kirshenbaum, also from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. To begin, within the HCI community, there is a plethora of design frameworks available to guide designers in co-designing with Indigenous communities. Designers aiming to be respectful towards Indigenous communities often turn to these equitable design approaches to avoid perpetuating harmful histories. However, a significant issue arises when some of these approaches become prescriptive to a generalized idea of an Indigenous community. This leads to designers developing practices based on their interpretations of what is equitable for this generalized concept of an Indigenous community, which can be very limiting. In this presentation, we delve into a method of developing customized practices tailored to collaborate with specific Indigenous communities. We will showcase our framework through our experience of developing design practices for the Kanaka Maoli, Native Hawaiian community in collaboration with the University of Hawaii Office of Indigenous Knowledge and Innovation. There are ongoing discussions highlighting the lack of clarity surrounding co-design methods and the tools to evaluate their beneficial contributions to Indigenous communities. For instance, a recent publication evaluated 15 studies using the term co-design in their work with Indigenous communities. Only 3 of those works provided a clear definition of co-design, and most showed a very limited scope of equity metrics, typically focusing on recruitment and diversity as signs of equity rather than the outcomes of the design. There's a common assumption that including Indigenous collaborators automatically ensures equitable design. However, we argue that this assumption limits our understanding and evaluation of co-design practices. We propose moving away from recruitment and inclusion as the main metrics of equitable co-design and instead build metrics based on the cultural base of the Indigenous community of interest, as equal or Indigenous-led design should already be the standard for projects related to Indigenous communities. We recognize tensions over decision-making, permission, and representation in the co-design process. However, we want to emphasize the importance of developing methods based on local epistemology. Our framework advocates for evaluations of co-design methods in terms of equity, focusing on how selected practices are determined and implemented through relevant local ancestral practices and values. A practice that is developed by an Indigenous community will undoubtedly hold within it ancestral knowledge, values, and language that may become accessible to Indigenous communities through the use of that practice. To try to fit other Indigenous communities' practices or to create generalized practices is reductive and limiting to the potential equity that co-design may provide. We are defining equitable co-design using a framework based on waypoints within the software development lifecycle. While many existing equity-based frameworks are rooted in design thinking, our framework leverages the SDLC model specifically to focus on the phases of requirements, design, prototype, and test. We chose this for its flexibility, considering its foundational nature across various design processes. We did this because we anticipate that adaptations of our waypoints will be made to work with more refined processes like design thinking. Each waypoint is derived from Indigenous guidelines, methodologies, and frameworks for research, media, and technology development involving Indigenous cultural heritage. Our intention is for these waypoints to serve as metrics defining equitable co-design with specific practices derived from the knowledge and practices of Indigenous communities. Our framework includes waypoints of positionality, locality, sovereignty, responsibility, and feedback. Just as navigational waypoints guide travelers in the physical world, design waypoints guide designers through the development cycle, allowing for navigation and correction of methods. Design teams should collectively discuss and answer the questions raised by our framework as detailed in the appendix of this presentation's related paper. This process should be iterative alongside the development cycle. Discussions may be structured with intentional meetings to systematically address framework questions, or it could be opportunistic, with relevant answers formed during other design and development activities. Answers to framework questions are meant to evolve alongside technology iterations, ensuring ongoing alignment with Indigenous values and practices. If design teams encounter challenges such as difficulty answering questions, lack of Indigenous designer recruitment, or low participation feedback, they should pause their project and reflect on potential causes. Essentially, This framework presents a structured approach to equitable design rooted in Indigenous practice and should be adaptable across various design processes. We will give some example of practices that were established by the staff of OIKI, or the Office of Indigenous Knowledge and Innovation, following discussions that were guided by the questions in the framework. In future work, we'll share the specific technology outcomes, our answer to the waypoint questions, how we tackle design challenges, and then the effectiveness of our practice. However, for now, the point of this paper and the point of this presentation is we want to present this as an example to show how engaging with the framework yields diverse and specific practices from Indigenous designers. These examples aren't meant for other communities to copy, but to show how the framework can be used to develop a specific design practice. They don't cover all cultural practices and theories of Kanaka Maoli epistemology. Instead, they come from the specific knowledge and practices of the current OIKI staff, who are Kanaka Maoli. If another Kanaka Maoli group did this process, their practice would likely be different. We believe that this is a benefit, as it allows for the fluidity of practice that honors the diversity of knowledge within an Indigenous community, rather than strive to establish a reductive generalized practice. To go over the context of the design collaboration, it involves the installation of a spatial augmented reality system, and the overall holistic design challenges for the system included scaling the architecture of the system to be able to be sustained by entities who will house them, designing procedures with the housing entity to make the system accessible to students and community, designing interactive content for the system with community organizations with intentions to teach and hold ancestral knowledge and data, and designing curriculum so that others may create their own content without OIKI guidance. The practices were developed or adopted over a year as the OIKI team formed. They were used in the early stages of development and officially adopted, with some changes, after proving effective. What was effective or successful was gauged by the team's ability to use the practices comfortably and through feedback from community partners confirming their usefulness in collaboration. For this presentation, we will just go over the sovereignty waypoint. Remember, this is the waypoint regarding the creation of capacity for Indigenous designers to have authority and voice for the narrative, presentation, data, user experience, protocol of knowledge, transmission, and creative expression within the design of their technology. We will share a couple of examples of practice that were developed upon reflecting on this waypoint. So first, we determined an agreed upon metric that would guide us on design decisions such as which community members should we partner with. For us, we designated the metric as Aina Momona. Literally, this term, it means abundant land and was used as a term to refer to rich and fertile places. But it is also used to refer to the general idea of cultivating practices that bring abundance to our land that will inevitably allow future generations to perpetuate that abundance. This abundance can be interpreted as not just the health of the land, but also its people, as it is a Kanaka Maoli belief that they are intrinsically linked. If a practice or outcome does not aid in the creation or perpetuation of this abundance, we do not consider it appropriate. Again, we share this to emphasize that Aina Momona is a uniquely Hawaiian metric, as its nuance is shaped by Hawaiian culture and history, which, within its use, brings certain expectations and responsibilities that can be understood by communities in Hawaii. Other Indigenous communities will have other metrics that will capture their needs and aspirations much better than using this metric or a generalized metric of to create abundance. In terms of data and intellectual property, our practice is guided by the Pauakalani Declaration. As described from its intro, in 2003, Kanaka Maoli of Hawaii gathered at Ka'ahapono, the Native Hawaiian Intellectual Property Rights Conference, and expressed their collective right of self-determination to perpetuate their culture under the threat of theft and commercialization. At the time of writing, there are no laws in the state of Hawaii that specifically protect Kanaka Maoli data, although many are working towards defining and establishing these protections. That is why documents such as the Pauakalani Declaration, created by Kanaka Maoli cultural practitioners and experts, are upheld even if they are not law. To summarize what this all means in regards to our practice, we communicate with the generators or inheritors of data and allow them to dictate the when, where, how, and why data is shared throughout the lifetime of the technology. We also respect decisions that are made from ancestral practice or values, the designation of what is kapu and kanawai. Kapu can be translated into English of what is restricted, and kanawai are the rules or the guidelines set to when things can be shown or withheld, and so on and so forth. So to conclude, we posit that including local Indigenous designers who have authority over design projects should be the basic requirement of any project that involves or impacts local Indigenous communities. We presented a framework that steps away from measuring inclusion and participation to gauge equity, and instead suggests a fundamental change, building their practice and evaluation methods from the ground up in a process led by Indigenous designers from the community of interest. This way, the practices of equitable design processes are different between different Indigenous communities. The practices will change as they are built from a specific Indigenous people's ancestral knowledge, values, practices, and their capacity at the time of designing. This is to ensure that reductive practices are not prescribed due to ideas of an ubiquitous Indigenous culture, and instead are derived from the perpetuation of continuity of a specific Indigenous community's lineage of ancestral knowledge, values, and practices. In this way, through the co-design process, solutions are developed at the speed of a community's capacity, permission, and need. The framework we describe includes waypoints of positionality, locality, sovereignty, responsibility, and feedback that act as metrics for holistic design practices that occur over the development cycle of a project. This is an ever-evolving framework, which we are bound to refine in the future. But overall, we would like our colleagues to understand the need for specificity of practice when it comes to designing with Indigenous communities in equitable ways, and that co-design should be evaluated for more than simply an inclusion metric. Technology overall offers us many opportunities to perpetuate the continuity of ancestral practice, data, and heritage, but it should be used in an equitable way. And with that, mahalo for your attention. And we just would like to acknowledge and give thanks to the Office of Indigenous Knowledge and Innovation, specifically Kamuela Enos and Rochelle Robley, and also acknowledge the Academy of Creative Media and their related grants that made this work possible. Mahalo again. Thank you for your attention.